Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Just a Dude podcast, where we dive deep into the lives, ideas, and stories of fascinating individuals. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we have a treat for you. We're going to explore the mind of someone who truly embodies what it means to be a modern Renaissance man. From journalism to politics, from creative writing to entrepreneurship, our guest today wears many hats and wears them all with flair. So without further ado, let's get into this. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Cameron Cowan. Cameron is not just a writer, he's a thinker, a commentator, and a creator whose work spans from the pages of his essays to the dynamic world of podcasting. His blog, The Cameron Journal, is a beacon for those seeking context in our often confusing world. With the motto, "The world is complicated, this is not," Cameron also hosts his own podcast, delving into politics, culture, and beyond. He's an educator, a public speaker, and an entrepreneur who's not afraid to tackle the big questions of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Cameron Cowan to Just a Dude podcast. Welcome, Cameron.
Hello, hello.
I'm so glad that you decided.
Yes, thank you for that lovely intro. You make me sound so much more exciting and important than I think I am.
No, I'm so glad to have you on the show. Your background is so amazing in the writing and everything that you do. I just wanted to have you on the show so we could discuss you, essentially let people introduce themselves to you.
Yeah, no, I've recently wanted to do that a bit more with my own folks because there's been so many new people recently, and I've been doing this for so long, I kind of have to reintroduce myself to everyone, and I'm going to have to do one of those 10 facts about me videos here soon, which gives me no thrill, but it's going to have to happen here in a minute.
Right, to let everybody know a little bit about you.
Yep,
exactly.
To get everybody up to speed. Yep.
Awesome. So, Cameron, who is Cameron Cowan? How would you explain yourself? Here, maybe we can use this as your 10 things.
Well, the first thing I would start with is the location. The geographic location was a little bit backwards. I started in Arkansas when I was a child. I went to high school in Denver, and I now live in Wilmington, Delaware. Right now, I'm sort of refugeeing in Connecticut. I had a black mold situation in my place in Delaware, and I had to. What started as a temporary move has now become a permanent move, and where are we going to go next, sort of thing, which is fun. But
yeah, black mold is never something you want to fool around with either.
No, but it's been great. I was in Seattle for 10 years and came out to the East Coast in 2023, and it's been really great. So yes, the intro really kind of capitalized on it. I'm a creative director of the Cameron Journal. We're a digital first publication that covers politics, society, and life. I started in 2014 making little YouTube videos called The Cameron Cowan Show and writing small articles, and we've just kind of grown from there, from a handful, a few dozen hits today, to now we do thousands a day. And thousands of video views a week and all this sort of thing. And so it's been a fun ride on, CameronJournal.com, on Medium, on other places. I'm on all your favorite social media channels. I am the author of 3 books, 2 of which are still in print. And I have a new book coming out here in the summer called America's Lost Generation, which I'm working on at the present. We just got the final changes back for it the other day. So
nice.
Yes, getting ready to start that process, which is always fun.
I gotta ask. Sorry, Cameron. I gotta ask, what is the Lost Generation? I don't want to get into too much of the book, but just the generation that you're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, so it's basically the story of millennials who were most affected by the Great Financial Crisis. Millennials in general, but specifically those born between 1986 and 1991, and it basically looks at millennials through the lens of what happened in Japan in 1991 with their own property crisis, and also 6 years later, the follow-up of the Asian financial crisis, and what that did to that generation of Japanese people. Hint, hint, not good.
Right.
There's actually a pension crisis in Japan right now because they have a fairly large portion of the population that was never got on the jobs to contribute to the pension fund that now are relying on that fund, but the money's not there.
Gotcha. So I would take it. Yeah. Sorry, I would take it that their pension funds would kind of be similar to our Social Security. Is that?
Yes, but much more extravagant.
Gotcha. Yeah, a little bit
So
more than a little bit more than your
yes,
$100 a month, right?
yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. And so just kind of comparing those two things together. The book is unique because not only do I go over a lot of numbers and articles and dialogue, and I get into dating and children and home ownership and all that sort of thing, but it also features real interviews from people on the r/Lost Generation subreddit.
Nice.
Real stories submitted by real people, from the plumber who said, I love being here, love what you're writing, but my life is fine, to the middle
Hmm.
class family that said we're one job loss or health crisis away from losing everything, to the people whose careers never got off the ground.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's great.
I definitely kind of considered myself one of them because I graduated in 2000, college in 2009. Big mistake. And then went to grad school and graduated in 2011. Not any better.
No.
No, and always wonder why my career had never gone off the ground. And in my many years of writing about it at the Cameron Journal and then putting this book together, I realized that a lot of us were the victim of trends that were already changing before the Great Financial Crisis,
Hmm.
and then subsequently that the Great Financial Crisis accelerated that. And that was the death of humanities, the death of the entry-level job, which is
Yeah.
very important,
Yep.
things like that. And so I go through all of that in the book and try to bring together data and storytelling to kind of tell the story of what happened while this happened. And also we get into the narratives and dialogue and all the terrible things that have been written about millennials. In fact,
Yeah.
right before I came on this show, I think it was The Atlantic, no, somebody else, did a story about the millennials are the adults now and they're adulting full time and they're freaking out. And it's like, this has been our whole adult lives. I've been
Yeah.
doing this almost 20 years. Help, help.
Yeah.
And
No,
so, yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
absolutely right, because I guess you would call an older millennial because I was born in 81. So I'm like
yeah.
right on that cutoff, or I think people call me a zennial, between Generation X and the millennial. But
There's a micro generation between 1978 and 1983 we call Zennials that are kind of this
yeah,
weird kind of micro
we're like a
crossover.
mix.
Yes, and I talk about that little micro generation. I have a lot of friends who are that age as well. And so I talk about the little micro generation. And the advantage if you are on the older end is you got out of college or high school and had a chance to maybe get on the property ladder, get a job before things really got bad. Some did and some didn't. But I mean, the I can always tell people who went through the kind of 2008 to about 2013 period, because if you got out before, you probably own a house. It's been a financial struggle, but you have kind of figured it out. If you're after, you're probably in the same situation. If you're in that '08 to 11, about 5 years or so,
My gosh, yeah, I
your
can't even
life,
imagine.
your experience, your career, your everything has been radically different from people on either side of you. And it lives on to this day. And that
Yeah,
doesn't even get into the fact that millennials only own 4% of wealth in the United States. And 2% of that is Mark Zuckerberg. Just Mark
just Mark.
Zuckerberg.
It's just Mark
Yeah,
Zuckerberg. Yeah,
just
of
Mark
course,
Zuckerberg. Yeah,
of
I mean,
course.
so I mean, if you're a Gen X, the Boomers obviously have most of the wealth. Gen
Yep.
X have a nice chunk of it.
Yeah.
Millennials have a very very small amount, and Gen Z's just coming along.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you,
Although Gen Z's on track to do much better than Millennials because
which is
they
not
have a
necessarily
different
right.
labor market.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a bad. I mean, it's a bad thing for us in the millennial market, but not necessarily
right.
for the next generation, right? But
No,
I'm
I mean,
right
God
with you.
bless them.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
Even with me being a little bit older millennial, that, like the housing crisis, that affected me. I bought my first house in '05, and it
yeah,
was a total fixer upper. Okay.
yeah,
I sold it. I probably put $80,000 into the house, over the course of 10 years,
yeah,
and sold it for 20 grand less than I bought it for.
yeah. Which is just gut wrenching.
It
Yeah, no,
is.
that's
It
just gut
is.
wrenching.
And I got laid off in '09. I was actually a police officer in 2009, and the village I worked for didn't have money to keep a police department. So they got rid of the whole thing. So I know I felt the pain. I
No,
felt the
and
pain.
there's stories like that in the book as well. And yes, I mean, and people, I mean, it's kind of funny, given present circumstances, we're probably heading into another downturn, self-inflicted, but it's coming. And people, I think a lot of younger people who were children during that don't understand. Someone would put out a job listing, and 400 people would show up in person trying to get it.
My goodness.
Anybody
Yes.
is like, oh, you need 2 pizza delivery drivers. You'd have 400 people, anybody from all walks, just willing to deliver pizzas. And that's how it was for 2008, 2009, 2010,
Yeah.
2011, some of 2012 really, and things didn't really pick up till 2013. And even in my own career, those were struggling years. I was working in nightlife at a small magazine.
Hmm.
Those were struggling years. I didn't really get my first professional job until 2014, actually.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
And so that's what you
I
meant by the entry level jobs. They're just not there.
yeah, no, they really are not. And companies figured out they could save a lot of money by not really training people. And they've had the luxury. They don't really have it anymore, but they've had the luxury because the job market has been pretty elastic
Yeah. Yeah,
for a
it
long
really
time.
has.
They've had the luxury of just being able to wait around for the right person that technically ticks all the right boxes to come along. And now the job market is so broken. 40% of job listings are fake. That's a huge
Yeah.
problem no one
Yeah,
talks about.
absolutely. We didn't have that in '09, did we?
No, we did not. And that's new.
Yeah.
And on the other kind of half of that is that now, like, I've heard recruiters openly say resumes are dead. It's your LinkedIn profile and your personal network that's going to get you through every single time. And as someone who knows a lot of people, but not anyone who can necessarily get me in
Hmm.
anywhere, sort of thing, I was kind of like, well, that's the end of me. I really figured out to make this camera draw thing work. Like because it's just I've never been able to network my way into an opportunity, and there are
Yeah.
millions of people in the same situation, and I think it's interesting. In the books that I looked at to write this, a
Hmm.
lot of them were very numbers and stats heavy. No one was telling the story.
Yeah, because
What's
numbers
the
tell one
lived
story.
experience?
Yeah, but what's
Yes.
the actual story behind the numbers?
And this is what my book seeks to do, is to tell the story behind the numbers. Say, yeah, here are the stats, but here's the story, here's the lived experience, here's how the dating markets broke. Here's how
Hmm.
all of these all these disparate trends and things that have been going on since, 5, 6, 7, 05, 06, 07, 08
Hmm.
to now, all this sort of thing, have kind of compiled together into the present mess. And here's, especially as, our oldest are of us are in their mid 40s, and I'm the middle of us are in our late
Hmm.
30s, and the very end of us are 32 this year.
Yeah. Wow.
How we have navigated all this, and why, millennials are just now finally having children, and for finally just getting married, and finally just buying houses, and all this type of thing, and why there's kind of been this huge delay in it all, and why there's been a huge delay in the wealth creation, all this type of thing, and even getting into big stuff like millennials were the first generation to really have to compete on a global basis with labor. The boomers never had to do that.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah, you're
victims
right.
of offshoring and deindustrialization for sure.
Hmm.
And that's a very fascinating, very sad set of tales and circumstances. But but they kind of came crashing in on them, and they had to kind of reorganize themselves in the new economy. Millennials never even had the basis to start with. We came out competing in the global economy, and that meant wages were lower. I mean, there was all these knock-on effects of having to compete in a globalized economy. And that, honestly, a lot of, I think, why certain people have, voted for Trump is because that you've had 3 generations now who have been victims of offshoring, deindustrialization,
Hmm.
a globalized economy that seems to do really, really great if you live in China, not so great if you live in Pennsylvania, and all this sort of thing, and really trying to understand all of this and basically tell the story of here's kind of how we got here. And there's good points and there's bad points, all this type of thing. But the reality is, as much as I don't like how some people in this country voted,
Hmm.
I understand it because I've driven through Western Pennsylvania where there's a
Right.
rusty steel mill on every corner. It's like, well, that's
Yep.
depressing. It's no wonder they voted for the nearest charlatan they could find to promise to fix it. Even though he has
Yeah.
no intention of doing so, I get why they're on board.
And you have to think too, Cameron, because even
Yeah.
in, I'm in Ohio, and we have in the Cleveland area a ton of steel factories that are just partially open, because everything was
Yes.
offshored, like you said. And you're
And
right.
rusting
There's people,
away.
yep. And there's
Yeah.
people here that are thinking, oh, yay, we're going to bring the steel manufacturing jobs back. Will it happen? I don't know. I mean, with the tariffs, maybe, but I guess time will tell, right?
Well, and here's the sad reality of that. Modern steel production is incredibly automated.
It
If you
is.
go look at the new electric arc furnaces and everything, 2 guys run that whole thing.
Yep. It's just basically a machine. I mean, they plug
Yeah.
in the stuff and away it goes. They just monitor it.
Goes in one end, steel comes out the other.
Yep.
They're there to make sure everything keeps rolling and running, sort of thing.
Exactly. And that the
I
place
worked
doesn't burn
across the
down.
I worked across the parking lot from a steel plant in Seattle that made rebar for roads
Mm-hmm.
called Nucor. And that place, I think, only had 25 people working in it. And they produced most of the rebar for a 3-state area. I mean, the new manufacturing will probably be coming back, not just for tariff reasons, but for other reasons we found out during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is those operations are going to be highly automated. The days of us needing 6,000 people to show up to a building to do stuff is over.
I agree.
And that's not coming back, and no one really wants to hear that.
No, I think you're right. They don't,
yeah.
because that's what we built. That was essentially the backbone of the United States of America, was our manufacturing industry. But just like you said, during the baby boomer and Gen Xers, they outsourced everything. And now that manufacturing has, I mean, even with tariffs, it's still probably going to be cheaper than what we can make it for here.
No, I mean, one of the big problems with a manufacturing base in this country, and it's twofold. One, it's foolish for us to become an export market, because who's going to buy the stuff?
Right.
I mean, for
You're right.
Europe and Japan after World War II, we became their market. We quit running a trade surplus to run a trade deficit to buy their stuff to rebuild them. So they had a ready market, us.
Mm-hmm.
There's no ready market for us to export goods to. China is not interested. They never have been. The rest of the world is fairly saturated. They have their own domestic. No, there's no ready market to kind of sell this stuff to. And the other problem is American labor is the most expensive in the world, which makes our exports inherently uncompetitive. And it will mean everything gets much more expensive for people at home. And so you have this twofold problem of, yes, it sounds good. Oh, we're going to, put up these factories and make this stuff, and that's all fine and well and all this sort of thing. But the reality is that it's actually incredibly inefficient and uncompetitive for us to become an export country. It just is. That's just the reality.
With you. I don't disagree with you there. And I think you're right, because, and I don't want to say that like unions and stuff like that are bad by any means, but they've gotten us fair wages, right, for our industrial workers, and gotten them, fair, equitable wages that are not paid anywhere else in the world, which is just automatically going to make it more expensive. If you've got higher salaries, it's going to make the goods cost more,
Yes, and on, kind of on top of that, I mean, I love a good union, and I think more workers should be unionized, especially in service industries. The unions are a double-edged sword.
They are.
And we saw with the potential port strike last fall that Mr. Biden deftly shut down, I think because he told somebody about some bodies buried in a Cadillac from '86. I'm convinced. Like, it's like, we don't want to go find out what's in the Hudson River. I'll have them dredge the whole thing out. Sort of thing. And sort of, but I mean, but the reality is they were resisting automation because it's already come to the West Coast ports. Yeah. And the reality is they were able to cut workforce by a third or more due to that automation. And the East Coast ports have seen the writing on the wall, and they've trying to resist it. I don't know how much they're in new contract negotiations right now. I don't know how long that's going to last for them. I think it's going to come along at some point, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to. I mean, at some point, they're just not going to have a choice,
And copy paste to every other industry. The reality is modern manufacturing is incredibly automated, especially in things like that. And it's, now it's like you do not necessarily need as many humans. I did a post several years ago where I took videos, archival footage of factories, and I strung them all together from the 30s to the present day. And I said, what do you notice as these decades roll by? Fewer and fewer people involved. In the 70s, you had 4 guys with guns painting a car. Today, it's one guy that runs a machine from behind a booth in nice clothing. He doesn't even wear a getup. He wears normal clothes, sort of thing.
He doesn't have to put on a face mask or anything to go in and do it.
He's in a booth.
He's totally protected. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, he's in a booth telling the robot what to do, and one guy can paint a car every so often. And in some factories like Kia, they do the dunking method, then they paint a car every 13 minutes.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing.
Yes, it is. It is. But that's the reality of modern manufacturing. And so when people are kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to get back to manufacturing, you don't want the manufacturing jobs. Here's what you do want. You want the stability, the wages, the benefits, and the assured middle class life those jobs offered. And one of the things that we have not done in our economy since at least when my book on Lost Generation starts in 2008 is we have not created the type of jobs that afford that for people. And Obama complained about it in the jobs created in the recovery from the GFC. He said, we're creating a lot of jobs, but the reality is they don't pay very well. And they tend to be rather low status and low prestige. They tend to be service sector, jobs sort of
Yeah,
thing.
low pay, low skill type of thing.
Yeah, and the new jobs of the information economy have been locked out for the uneducated.
Mm-hmm.
And which is, I very sort of crassly say, we forgot to create jobs for stupid people, which is a very impolite and crass and very
Yeah,
unpolitically
but
correct thing to say.
truthful.
But yes, we
Yes.
forgot to create jobs for stupid people. And it's the confluence. So in 2016, I predicted Trump was going to win in a video I called as Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at all this back then and said, I don't like it, but I get it, sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Yeah.
And even now, it's really about the solid middle class life that those jobs once offered and once afforded. And so people look back upon that fondly. And also, I think it was the not having to move around and not change jobs so much. The reality is having to change jobs every 2 to 5 years is incredibly disrupting to
Yep.
your life. It sucks back your savings, all this sort of thing. And people find that frustrating as well. My dad got a job for the National Center for Atmospheric Research in 1991. He is going to retire there this month at some point in the year of our Lord 2025.
Well, congratulations to him. At least he's
Yes.
able to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been, at the same place in the same organization, come out all this time, surviving multiple government shutdowns and one, two, three, four, five, six presidential administrations. So, yeah, I mean, but that the reality is that that's just not how the modern economy works. I've never had the opportunity to do that. Most people I know have never had the chance to do that. That's just not how the economy works anymore. And I think for a lot of people, especially in the middle of the country, who their grandfather probably, at this point, their grandfather probably had that. Their father might have mostly had that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing, and they don't.
Yeah, I
And
mean, right here,
yeah,
around here where I'm at, Goodyear is the biggest, manufacturing industry that we have around my part, Goodyear Tire and Rubber. And everybody's grandparents, if you ask anybody that lives around me, someone in their family worked for Goodyear. Someone in their family retired from Goodyear. I know my grandfather retired after 50 years,
yeah,
and he worked for them. And my dad was, like I was like him. He was a police officer. He retired after 27 years, same place. Me, no, I was a police officer. I was an EMT. I work in technology now. I've worked in healthcare. I've done it all just because, like you said, there's no retirement plan for us anymore. It's called a 401k, right? For the majority of
yeah,
us.
yeah.
And we could take that with us wherever we go. So there's really no incentive, if you think about it, other than monetary and maybe, work-life balance for someone to stay at a company long-term.
No, there really isn't. But I think the reality is, there's a lot of people, especially in the middle of the country, who want that type of stability.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
would
it
love it
was
myself.
Yeah, no, I actually years ago had the former CEO of Goodyear Tire on the show. And it was a very fascinating conversation. We went on to work for Pirelli in Italy, and his wife loved 5 years in Milan. That she was really happy about
I'm
that.
sure.
Um, so yeah, it was over at Pirelli Tire, and it was good. The reality is that that's just not how the modern globalized dynamic economy that we have lived in basically until today, on March the 4th, 2025, when
Mm-hmm.
Trump's tariffs went in, has created an economy that moves a lot more, but has been very unstable for the average everyday person.
You're
And I
absolutely right.
think, yeah, I think for educated people who tend to make more money, and tend to be working in growth industries like tech, healthcare, pharma, all this type of thing. You have the money and resources to move. It makes sense for you to do that. It's a lot easier to take on. That doesn't make a lot of sense if you're in Akron or Canton or Cleveland. and it's not as fun. You're making $50,000-$60,000 a year. An interruption in paycheck is a
Oh my
household
gosh.
crisis event.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't
More
know.
marriages have been killed by a job loss than
Exactly.
any other thing.
Yeah, because, and you said it right, Cameron, when we first started was, we're all looking for that opportunity. What was it? Oh my gosh, I just had a brain fart.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, you had basically said something along the lines of, we're looking for that opportunity essentially that our parents had.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question, and if this is in your book, I don't want to give anything away, but what do you see from your background, education, and your research? What is the next normal job that someone can just get into? Do we have that, or is that yet to be really identified?
Oh, I have bad news for everybody. I think what the Trump administration is doing throws a little bit of a monkey wrench in all of this. But I think we're probably going to tend more towards gig and contract work than not. This is how things worked before the New Deal came in, before unionization came in the 30s, where, and you already see this in a lot of places where Google has a very bad habit of keeping people on contract and not bringing them on as full-time employees.
Right. Yep.
This extends, and I use that as kind of the top end. The bottom end is factories. Like there's a big assembly plant outside of Chicago that assembles for Chrysler, which is owned by Stellantis.
Yep.
They tend to hire people from temp agencies a lot. So those people get hired. They don't have to join the union, can't join the union.
Yeah, because they're not a regular.
They're not a regular employee.
Yep.
And they can be paid whatever.
Yeah, probably much less. Probably at least half.
Yes, it's usually much lesser half, no benefits, all this type of thing, and they can be gotten rid of in a second,
like
sort
that,
of thing.
Yep.
This is probably, in my view, the trend of things going forward. I've seen that coming since about 2012. In fact, when I written about the gig economy, I tell the story. I was standing in line at a Barnes & Noble and someone asked what you did. I said, oh, I'm a freelance writer because I've been a gig worker a lot in my life. So I know this. And I said, yeah. And we got to talking and I said, yeah, in the future, more people will work like I do than work like you.
Yeah.
And that just kind of blew her mind. And fast forward 20 years, and here we are, and this has become a reality sort of thing. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think that's going to kind of be the dirty little secret about those new manufacturing jobs, is if people think they're going to get hired on for a long time at a great wage with great benefits as part of a union, I'm going to hold your hand while I tell you this. That's probably not going to happen. What's going to happen is you're probably going to end up getting told to go across town to a temp or a recruiting office, some nondescript strip mall,
just some little
sort of thing,
hole in the wall. Yep, that you're going to go fill out a paper
Chinese
app.
Food restaurant and nail salon, and you're going to stand in line for 2 hours to go in, fill out some paperwork or fill out an iPad sort of thing, and then told to report to the assembly line several days later, and you will never actually work for the company for whom you are vulcanizing the rubber, let's say.
Yeah.
Or building the car or building the computer chips. That's how it's probably going to happen in order to keep the cost of labor down, because that's the biggest thing that makes American products so uncompetitive. I understand that people are looking for that. And my only message would be, and this is a hard thing to hear, and I live in the middle of it. That's not how our economy works anymore. I'm sorry. It's not. We have to completely rethink money, housing, bills, children, all of it. Completely rethink everything. And I said years ago, we're going to have to completely rethink how we comprehend the economy. We never did.
Of course not. No.
Yeah, of course.
We're still living like the economies from the 1912s,
Yeah. I mean, the reality is we have built an economy like monthly billing, all this stuff. We're still living like it's 1996. It's not.
Yep.
Sort of thing. And we really have to rethink all of these things. And I mean, I would, you basically have to be prepared at some level to lose your job at any moment, to work multiple jobs, multiple careers. And the sad thing is this was the advice given to a lot of highly educated people in the 80s with degrees who basically had the 80s and 90s to kind of get used to this, because that's where it started, was at that end. And it's now filtered down to the everyday person. And I can even see, with people working 2 or 3 jobs, you may end up working a couple contracts from a couple different places to put together the income that makes it work and makes it happen. That's not what a lot of voters in this country want to hear.
And, the unfortunate thing is that, everybody wants to work what we think is a 40-hour-a-week job, right? And we should be able to
Yeah.
pay our bills, have a house. And even the fact of the matter is, until 2 years ago, I've worked 2 jobs since I was 14.
Yeah.
So it's like, what it's like, because if you're doing the gig thing, that you got to hustle to get that money and to get to that next step. And,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's super tough. And it's definitely not like our parents' time.
No, not at all. And that, unfortunately, the reality is, even if the tariffs are successful in bringing manufacturing back, and I think they will be for certain multinationals and all this sort of thing, and I'm not necessarily saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but the unfortunate reality is it's not going to create the middle class situation we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
No,
I don't
not
think
at
people
all.
understand that was a function of two things: very high taxes, 91% top end tax rates in the 50s, very high taxes, a lot of price controls, like airline tickets, trucking, all this sort of thing. A lot of taxes, a lot of regulation, and you had 48% of workers in a union. That's what really created that. The boomers didn't understand that and destroyed almost all of it with deregulation, all this type of thing. And now we're ending up in a situation where you may have people, working in these very fluid environments, trying to put together an income. And the unfortunate reality, as you know from working 2 jobs for so many years, it's exhausting. If not physically, mentally exhausting. I also work for my book publisher, and he and I were having the conversation today. I said, I've got to stop running 2 businesses because I have the Cameron Drive.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm speaking and I'm consulting and all this, and I'm doing book projects, all this type of thing. And then I have a publishing house to run.
Right.
Today we're doing a book launch. That has been 15 emails and 3 phone calls today. And I told him, I said, if I'm going to have a personal life, I've got to stop doing that. I've got to cut the fat, all sort of thing.
And that's really where I was too.
Yeah.
2 years ago, I was the same way. I was like, I got to slow down, because if not, I'm going to be dead by the time I'm 50.
Yes, yeah. But here's the sad, unfortunate reality: is dollars and cents wise, it does not yet make sense to do that.
No.
And I mean, I have kind of the bougie arty version of it, but this is the calculation many American families are sitting at their table with all the time of, where's the additional income going to come from? How are we going to do this? And if and then you pile on kids, care, school events,
and everything's so much more expensive than,
yes.
Even just over the last 10 years, if I look at the decades over our lifetime, I think the last 10 years, we've probably seen the biggest jump. And I think we have to blame COVID for a lot of that, right? Because we had a lot of manufacturing issues, companies shut down and everything. But you're right. Everything's so expensive that it used to be, I remember 10 years ago, you go to the grocery store, get a couple of bags of groceries, be under $50. And you're like, it's expensive, but what the heck? Now you get those same 2 bags of groceries and it's $150 to $200. And you're thinking, wait a second, what happened?
No, I go through that even now. I'll be kind of like, I've been to the store. I have 3 bags and I spent $110.
Yeah.
How?
Exactly.
Where is it?
Is there a gold brick in here that I'm missing? Yeah.
Yes. It was like, and the thing, no, and it's not any one item. It's just all of those things.
All of it
taken together. It adds up quickly.
Yeah. Cause if you think, just 3 cents here, 10 cents there, $1 here, I mean, that stacks up really quick.
It does.
Really quick.
Absolutely does. And I don't do a lot of processed things. I cook properly, from scratch and everything. So it's, it does. I mean, a modest increase in vegetables, sends things high, eggs sends things high. I mean,
the eggs. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. A lot of my canned goods are 50 cents to $1 higher. That adds up very quickly.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's a quite difficult thing. It's a quite difficult thing to deal with. And the reality, and I even found this with my own self, because I got it from both ends. All of my business expenses went up.
Yep.
Same time, all of my personal expenses went up. Yeah, and there's not enough dollars to go around.
Yeah, but yet nobody's giving you more money, right, Cameron? Nobody's saying, "Hey, Cameron, you did a great job. Here's some money."
And for me, I mean, I'm very lucky in business to have a certain amount of pricing power. I could kind of modestly increase things, but the reality is most people cannot walk into their boss's office with their grocery receipt and say, my groceries have gone up 22% in 5 years, which they have done.
Mm-hmm.
20% in 5 years, I'm going to need a 25% raise. Your
Yeah, and
boss
they're
is going
just
to
going to
laugh
laugh
you
at
out the
you.
building. Yeah, you're
They're
getting
just going
laughed
to
out of the
laugh at you.
building.
Yep.
And so the reality is, because we printed $5 trillion for COVID, that is that unfortunately we're in the situation where people are lowering their standard of living,
You're right.
and what they're buying and all this type of thing, because they're having to make do on a same amount of money for much, much less. And the sad thing is it's a very V-shaped thing. So out of COVID, the poor got a lot wealthier because we had all big wage gains in the lower end.
Mm-hmm.
The wealthy got a lot richer.
Of
Surprise,
course.
surprise, they always seem to. The people who really suffered, and this is why Trump won, the middle. If you were making between 50,000 and about 300,000, you've watched your purchasing power in the last couple years evaporate like water in a desert. It's been
Absolutely.
sad to see. And I've seen it myself in terms of, okay, what are we going to cut? What are we going to do with that? I mean, and I started cutting parts of the business, sort of thing, to cut down on that end of things, and then personal as well. And it's like, maybe time to shop for car insurance,
Yep. I did the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah, you're looking everywhere you can to just, even if it's just a couple of bucks, you're like, I can use anything I can get right now.
I turned into my dad. An Excel spreadsheet was started.
Yep.
Everything was cataloged. I was with my phone in the bank being like, okay, what's that? Well, some security can say, okay, we're cutting that. We're like,
Yep.
every month it was like, okay, what can we cut, to kind of balance this out?
Which is so sad because we live in a country that is so wealthy, yet the disparity between the top and the bottom is so huge. The amount of money that I just see, like, whether you like Doge or not, you see a lot of the contracts of what we were spending money on. And some of the things we're spending money on, I'm like, we could have fixed homelessness in this country.
Yeah.
We could have literally bought a house for everybody that was homeless. For the war in Ukraine, same thing. We could have taken that money and used it here. Now, I'm not saying that's what that money was for, but just example wise of how rich this country is. But yet people, normal, everyday people like you and I, Cameron, we're hurting, and like you said, $50,000 10 years ago was a good chunk of money.
Absolutely.
Now you're like 50 grand. What's that going to get me? I can't even get an apartment with that,
No. I mean, it's a very, absolutely, it's a very difficult thing for the average person to navigate. And to your point, and people, I mean, I'm not excited about what Elon Musk is doing at Doge. We're talking
And that's
about,
fine. You're absolutely allowed to.
we don't want
Yeah.
unelected bureaucrats doing things, and that's another discussion for another day. And U.S. aid is the best part of our foreign policy, and I think is the best part of this country for us to ease the suffering around the world. I think the war in Ukraine has been entirely in our national interest, and I feel terrible that we're abandoning them. That all being said,
yeah, and I think, Cameron, I'd like to look at it from a different point of view. Where I don't think we're abandoning Ukraine or its people. I think the time has come to really push that peace. And I think, and a lot of people, don't like Trump, and that's totally fine. Like I said, if you don't like him, I totally get it. But I see what he's doing, like when he withheld military response to Ukraine. Now you see, I don't know if you saw the news today, but now Zelensky's ready for peace again. So it's like the
yes.
negotiation of the deal is the way, I look at it more from a business standpoint but it's not normal politics. I get that.
Well, no, but you're absolutely making the point that I was absolutely about to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the view of a lot of people, to your point before and to this now, that, Ukraine has cost a lot of money. And even I said a couple of years ago, this war is starting to run into money. How much more are we going to pay for this sort of thing? Even though I believe it's in the strategic interest, it's getting expensive. We should have a think about that. I think the average looks around and has exactly the same thought you did of, we have a lot of problems around here. The bridges are falling apart. The homelessness is rising. All this sort of thing. And, and we're, paying for all this. We're doing arts grants to transgender plays in Ireland. What the hell? So I mean, it's just, and I think for a lot of people, it's gotten way out of control. And we have an isolationism and protectionism streak in this country that comes out, and we haven't had it in about a century. So it's due. And it was about this time last century when it came out, so it's right on time.
Right on time.
And I think people are wanting to pull back from these many commitments and kind of recenter on ourselves and trying to solve our own internal problems rather than trying to solve everyone else's problems. And I talked about this on the news hour on Monday. But yeah, trying to solve everyone else's problems. And I think to your point with, Ukraine and all this type of thing, I think it does become a negotiation tactic. I think the unfortunate part is that while Trump is playing negotiation games, the reality on the ground is they will start to lose territory. And what Putin will do is he will seize every crumb of dirt he can get a hold on so that when the peace talks finally do start happening, they can say, well, this is the boundary that we're going to annex.
That I don't disagree with you at all, because I do think that there is a big opportunity right now. I have to assume they still have a good chunk of military weaponry that we, provided to Ukraine. So it's not going to be an instant thing, but I think you're absolutely right. I don't trust Putin. I don't trust Zelensky, neither one of them. That's just me. I trust the United States. I'm not saying I trust the president either, but I trust us, the people of the U.S., right? Because we're the ones that make the country. And our elected leaders, for lack of a better term, they're elected people. We'll call them leaders loosely.
Yeah.
Because we could say that on any, either side of the aisle. I think you could find just the same type of people where you're just like, how did this person get elected,
Yeah.
But I think you're right, though. We do have to be very cognizant in Ukraine, because we don't want Putin taking more territory. And then when the peace talks begin, saying, okay, we'll stop. You just give us everything we've already conquered. And I can see that happening, very much so.
And the discussions that have already been happening in Riyadh do not return Ukraine's ancient borders. That ship has kind of already sailed. I'm sure they do have plenty of equipment. Unfortunately, they go through a lot of ammunition. And as of this recording on March the 4th, President Trump has paused that today. I'm sure that will have changed by the time people hear this.
Yeah, probably.
I guarantee it will have. But the reality is that they're going to run out of ammunition. And I don't know that Europe's going to be able to get them new ammunition fast enough. And I think also people kind of forget the Ukraine war has done something very interesting for this country, which will be very helpful for us in the coming world. And that is, it has actually mobilized our military industrial base in a way that has not happened since World War II. And we need to definitely get some younger faces. I look at some of those videos, I'm kind of like, okay, my dad and his, it's my dad's generation in their 60s, turning the wrench on the ammo shell sort of thing. Like, okay, maybe we need some people in their 30s, but
exactly,
to be doing this. But it really has kind of caused this reindustrialization, and a lot of that money actually never leaves. It goes to contractors who employ people here to make the stuff and then send it over there. So we've kind of been, in a weird way, kind of paying ourselves to get the job done.
Yeah.
But it's a complicated
the only
situation.
end result that we're missing is keeping that weaponry for ourselves, which hopefully we have enough. I hope they didn't leave us high and dry.
No, we are high and dry. Actually, that's a huge problem. I read readiness reports.
Have you?
Yes. No, actually, we better hope China doesn't do anything right now, because we don't have enough bullets or shells. Ukraine has burnt through all their old Soviet stuff.
Yeah.
All the old Soviet stuff Europe had, all the old Soviet stuff we had. They burn through 10,000 shells and ammunition a month. We only manufacture 16. So we've really been pulling from savings. So actually, our ammunition store, equipment-wise, we're good, but our ammunition stores is very depleted, and it's quite a problem. So.
Yep. Yeah.
And I wonder how fast it'll be refilled, given that the Trump administration wants to reduce defense spending 8% a year for the next 5 years. One of the few things I agree with them on, actually. I've wanted to do that for 20 years. I'm all about it. But I also worry, does that include ammunition contracts? Like, can we get more things to shoot at people? Because right now, we're going to be throwing iPhones at the Chinese, sort of thing.
I think what you'll see there, and this is just from, my law enforcement place, and obviously I don't know this for a fact, but my thought process is generally when we say we want to cut 10% or less, that generally will come from administrative budget, so your civilian workforce or something like that, which again, that's probably one of the worst things about this government efficiency thing. And the one thing that really does touch my heart, even though I love the fact that taxpayers aren't paying for things that we don't even give our own people here, but I don't like, people being out of a job. I've been there more than once. I've been laid off where that's what you said earlier was we're only a paycheck away from absolutely being destroyed.
Yeah.
financially. And, that happened to me twice. I don't like that happen to anybody, but it is unfortunate. Where do you make that? Where do you draw that line, Cameron? Right? Like between jobs and savings.
Yeah. Well, I
It's
mean, I
tough.
think, I wish Mr. Musk had followed through on his idea of the generous severance packages to
Hmm.
transition people out of government work into the private sector,
Yeah.
especially given the private sector job market is not great right now, and it's not going to be getting any better in the short term. Um, it's gonna be quite difficult, and I wish they'd kind of followed through on that. And I think, unfortunately, it's tied up in courts right now.
Of course.
But
Always.
there's there's a lot of people kind of being left high and dry. Now that's tied up in courts right now. They're trying to figure it out. I'm sure some decisions will have come by the time people hear this. But yeah, I wish they kind of really followed through on that and made that real for people. And I realize there is definitely, what things one might consider waste to be cut, and
Hmm.
things that we just don't want to do anymore. Congress is very good at packing legislation with new programs, new funding
All
for
the
this,
time.
new research. Yeah, yes, they're very good at it. That's one of the
Yeah.
few things they managed to get done. And what has led to over decades is huge institutions, huge agencies, sub agencies, all this type of thing, doing all of this stuff. And my only real complaint with Doge is, rather than these sweeping decisions and then having to go rehire like the Ebola people and all this type of
Yeah.
thing, is to be a little bit more strategic. Go around town, learn what some of these places and what these people do, and then actually go after the stuff that we could learn to live without. For example, if you want to get rid of arts grants funding through USH, so we're not supporting transgender operas in Ireland, fine. I'm an
Yeah.
artist and I think we should support that, but I get it. Let's dump it.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Well, see,
We
and
can learn.
do you
We
know
can live without it.
do you know where my standpoint is on that, Cameron? Is that we don't even support transgender arts in the U.S. and we're
I've
supporting it in
worked in the
Ireland.
performing arts. We really need more funding.
That was always my big part. Was I look at it and I say, okay, is this something that I would pay for? Maybe not, but maybe other people. Cameron, you're in the arts. Maybe you'd say, hey, this is great money. But then when you
Yeah,
think, hey, we don't even pay for that in our own country, but we're paying for Ireland and Colombia and all these other countries to do these things that we don't even provide to our own people. That's what makes me mad, because I'm like, if we're going to pay for it, we should pay for our own people first, then
right.
worry. It's like I heard an analogy the other day, Cameron, that it's like when you're in an airplane. They tell you if the airplane's going down, you put your oxygen mask on first, then you help others. And I think that's where people are going with our country right now. Is we've got to help ourselves, reevaluate, maybe reset. I don't know if reset's a good word for it, because I think as long as we have all of our politicians that we have, and I mean this across both sides, we're
Yeah,
just going to have the same thing that we have,
it's true. You're
But
not wrong. Yeah.
yeah, it's the same old, same old. We're going to go back and forth. This 4 years will be under this party. This 4 years, it's just going to keep going back and
I would
forth. But
love to break the two-party duopoly. Nothing would make me happier.
yes, absolutely. I was talking to my wife the other day. I said, what I would love is that they say you cannot be affiliated with a political party and you cannot take donations more than a certain amount to run for office, and then break it down to each level to make that playing field, level across the board for politicians. But that's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
We know who's in charge, and they're never going to give it up.
Well, here's the sad thing. The founding fathers did not intend for us to have political parties.
No, they
And
didn't.
so our system isn't really set up for political parties, even though, and here it was a huge oversight, because political parties were literally forming as they
At
were
the time.
writing the
Yep.
Constitution. So if you read the note, it was literally, and you didn't change course at any point, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so our system kind of has parties, but unfortunately our system isn't built to deal with political parties. And so we've unfortunately ended up, since the end of World War II, with this two-party duopoly. For most of American history, it wasn't really a problem. In the 19th century, you had multiple parties running for president, running for Congress. You had third parties winning electoral votes in 1948. As recently as that. Unfortunately, we have been stuck in a duopoly for about 65 years or so. And nothing would make me happier than to break all that up, because I agree there
Yes.
is a lot of rot on both sides. That was the motivation behind the Tea Party, because I was part of the Tea Party in
Yeah, I remember that. I
2009,
loved the
2010.
idea of the Tea Party. Absolutely.
Yes, and that was a big thing in the Tea Party. It was also a big thing in Occupy, as we wanted to make the Democratic Party more progressive. I got involved in Occupy a couple years later, and both kind of saw the same problem from the opposite side, and wanted to do something about it. And that has been very influential on our politics for the last 15 years.
Well, and you know what? And even if you think back, probably when you were a kid, or, for me, when in the 90s, the most relevant or first relevant presidency I remember is Clinton. And with Clinton,
me too. I'm 37 in 2 months.
Yeah. So you remember
HW,
Clinton.
I wasn't conscious for. Clinton was the first. Yeah, was the first president.
Yeah, I remember a little bit of HW, but of the first Bush, but Clinton was the main man. And I actually said, that's when I started working, was during Clinton, and I actually never found a job that was minimum wage. I actually got paid more than that, and that's how good the economy, I think, was back then. But we had some of those jobs, like you talked about earlier, where they were entry-level jobs, that people right off the street could do those types of things. But that just shows how much it's changed. And with the dual policies, even back then in Clinton's time, and sorry to go a long way about this, but even in Clinton's time, it seemed like, even though we had two different parties, right, still majority, Democrat and Republican, they somehow found a way to work together. They were able to balance the budget when Clinton was office, and that had to take both sides because you couldn't do it with just one. And it seems like we used to always say, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, to where now, and maybe Trump introduced this because he was during his first election, but now it just seems like it's either my way or the highway. And you're either I'm right, you're wrong, and we never actually talk to each other like you and I are talking right now. Just hear each other's viewpoints, see what we have. There's not one thing that you said today that I disagree with, and I tend to lean to the right. But the idea is that's the message that I try to get across to people is, even though we have differences, we're always going to have more in common than we have apart. And that's the country I'd love to see.
Well, I think part of the thing that broke that up, and it may have started beforehand, some of my older podcast guests would have a different perspective than I do. But for me, I really saw that as part of the Tea Party. The big impetus of the Tea Party was they were mad at how closely Republicans were working with Democrats. And I ran a Tea Party publication called Liberty Journal. I was very involved in that movement. And a lot of their complaints were the Republicans were working too close to Democrats, and that Republicans should go to Washington and represent their specific views and doggedly stick to them and enforce those views. And in my view, that was the beginning of our modern politics, where it's all or nothing, and therefore very little gets done because there's no room for compromise.
You're right.
Because you're going to go back to your district and get roasted. And for Congress critters, there were kind of two big moments of inflection. One was in 2010, a lot of everybody got thrown out. As Republicans got a lot of Democrat districts as Obama got wiped out in his first midterms. And then you also had a lot of non-Tea Party Republicans get wiped out intra-party by Tea Party Republicans. And that really, this got you people like Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, yep.
That's when he got elected. And that really kind of started that. The similar thing happened to the Democratic Party when you started having purity tests from the progressive left. And I love my progressives. I consider myself fairly progressive myself. But you had on the left, you had a similar thing of you have the far left demanding ever more, I hate to use this word, extreme, but we'll say non-mainstream stances that make it, as I tell people, that's great in California. It'll get us in New York. How the hell are you going to sell that in Kansas? I grew up in a flyover state. Like how, like I lived in Seattle for 10 years. That will work great here in Seattle. How are we going to sell that in Iowa?
Yeah. And
go to a diner in Dubuque and sell that. Good luck.
That's the same thing here, right? In
Call
Ohio.
me when they run you out.
The heart of the Midwest, right? The heart of it all. And so some of the things, like you said, that, you're in Washington or Seattle, they would not fly here, in Ohio or in the Midwest. Now, some of the bigger cities, they would.
Yeah.
Like, I could see like maybe Columbus, Cleveland, your bigger metropolitan areas. But for the most part,
you
Ohio's
can sell
rural,
that in Minneapolis or St. Louis or Chicago.
But the rest of the state.
Yes, but that's why it was mainly, but like Dubuque, it's like you're not. There's a lot of that outside of the state, and that's a lot of voters. Not as many as a lot of cities, but that's a lot of voters. It's like you're not going to be able to sell that stuff out there. George Bush, talking about the financial crisis, said bailing out Wall Street sounds great in New York City. It does not work in Midland, Texas, and he's 110%. And they were talking about TARP, which failed the first time they voted on it because no one wanted to vote for it.
Exactly.
I mean, it was this kind of a self-same. Self-same situation. And so, unfortunately, in the last 15 years, you've had each of the major parties getting pulled to their extremes. And that is why independent is the is the biggest declaration in this country.
Yeah.
People are tending to leave that behind. And it also has made it very difficult for any sort of real meaningful compromise to happen. I think the hard part is Trump has taken that dynamic and he has turned the burner on high.
Yeah,
And
I will not disagree with that. I will not
the
disagree
pot
with
has
that.
boiled over
Yep.
many times, and it has gotten more and more crazy. Anything, I think probably the one good thing about Joe Biden for the Democrats is it kind of calmed the progressive left down for a while, but it didn't necessarily work out because Joe Biden gave the progressive left a lot in his
He
presidency, and then everyone stayed home over Gaza, and we lost in 24. I mean, and people in the Democratic Party have complained. I work in Democratic politics. They've complained, we gave you people everything, and you did not help us out at the ballot box. You expect this party is going to give you anything down the road ever again? What's the incentive? There isn't one. And so it's a very difficult thing. And I think if there's probably one thing that I think is starting to happen, and I saw it last year, and I think it's still going to happen regardless of what happens with Trump and company, is I think there's a big desire to kind of get things back to the middle. People want government to get to work, back to work.
Yep.
Because it's quite clear this not governance thing we've been doing for
has
about
not
20
been
years
working.
or so has not been working. There's problems to solve. People want to get people to Washington and actually get stuff done. And I think that's part of Trump's appeal, even though he doesn't necessarily get stuff done.
Yeah.
He looks like he's doing a lot.
Well,
and people appreciate that.
And I think that's part of the thing why his fan base is really supporting him right now, is because he's doing what they see as following up on the campaign promises. Now, as far as you and I know, it's probably, for the most part, a smoke show. And, I don't want to say that, but, because I do lean that way. I want to see things happen. But as well as I do, everything.
Little column B. Yeah.
Everything that he does as an executive order, is probably going to be challenged.
It's all tied up in court.
Exactly.
All of it is tied up in court. Yeah.
And so everything he does is going to be tied up in court. But he still gets to come out and say, hey, I tried to deliver everything you wanted and they stopped me.
Yes.
So if you think about it from that aspect, he's kind of a genius. But on the other aspect, this is one thing that I always say is some of his policies I like. But I wish, we used to say in the last election, someone needs to take his Twitter away and everything would be fine. I think the same thing. Don't let him do press conferences. Let him do as little as possible. Kind of like, Joe Biden wasn't known for doing press conferences. So go that route. And then people probably won't be as pissed off as much.
No, I in the first term, I said, there's some stuff that Trump did that I thought was a good idea. NAFTA needed to be rewritten. That was a terrible deal to start with. Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
No complaints from me there. Someone needed to bring China to heel. Finally, somebody get a backbone, please. So, I mean, there are aspects I wasn't necessarily unhappy about, but I do agree the main problem Trump has is the messaging.
Yes.
I think if there was some discipline in communications, which ironically they're a little bit better with this time around. Not totally, but they're getting there.
But yeah.
So they need a little bit more discipline around communication and all this type of thing. I think there would be opportunity there to bring a lot of people along. I think the thing that hurts Trump the most, regardless of whether you voted for him or not, is Trump does not really do anything to reach out to the party opposite. Bush made, not that Bush really cared about the Democrats' opinions, and they controlled Congress for most of that time, so he really didn't care. But I mean, Bush also messaged things in a way that at least tried to kind of sort of reach out more on Social Security and healthcare, like Medicare Part D, less so on the Iraq and war in Afghanistan sort of thing, the NSA thing, to all this sort of thing. The efforts by previous Republican administrations were made to try to sell it to the country, kind of regardless of your background.
Yes.
Trump has never really cared about the opinions of the average Democrat voter. He cares very much about the approval of certain people within institutions.
Yes.
A lot, which gets into his own psychological issues. Another conversation for another day. But he cares very much for their approval. But he does not hand Democrats a bone to keep them quiet. And if he were smarter about that, he really could shut the left up with a couple of gimmies and handouts. And there's a long history of this in politics.
I was going to say, though, do you think at this point, though, because it almost seems like the hatred of him is just, it doesn't matter what he were to do, that
Yeah.
a lot of people just hate him for. He could get, like I said,
Yeah.
he could give everybody $1 million, and I think some people would complain that it was given in 20s instead of hundreds.
No, I mean, I think there is a certain class of people, especially people that use Twitter a lot, that definitely engage in that. When you get out into the street and talk to people, especially people who are not news wonks, political
Yes.
people like me, when you kind of get out of the news junkies, where opinions are much more sharply divided because we're reading, we're consuming,
And
we're
we're reading what
engaged, all
we
this type of
like,
thing.
right? Yeah.
Right, yes. Or, and we're, all this sort of thing. When you kind of break out of that world and you talk to people in line at the store, as I was doing today, all this type of thing, I think if he really tried to get people who they voted for him in 2016 but switched to Joe in 20 because it wasn't going well, and maybe they voted for Harris because they weren't ready for more Trump. It's kind of like, we've been there, done that, dude, sort of thing. I think those people he could do a lot for. Are certain far left? Are you getting AOC to shut up? No. Lost cause. Don't bother, and you can leave Bernie Sanders alone in a corner. Don't try to get them on board.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of, we'll call them purple voters in swing states and elsewhere for whom you could tamp down a lot of the vitriol and improve comment sections on TikTok and Twitter and elsewhere by handing out a couple bones. And people could say, okay, this is fairer. It's different this time. This is maybe a sort of return to normal politics sort of thing that we can stand. Maybe we'll get through this. I think part of the Trump administration's problem is they don't really do anything. Trump cares about his MAGA base, the people that show up to rallies, give the money, all this type of thing. And he doesn't even really care about moderate Republicans who maybe vote for him because he has the magic R but aren't really huge fans of him. And he does not give anything about what Democrats are talking about or feeling about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think from a win the country perspective, that's a bit of a mistake. I think he would be surprised at how much different the narrative around him would be. And I know he watches it every single day on TV.
He does.
He would be surprised at how the narrative would shift with a couple bones.
Do you think the politicians that are in office now, though, especially, I guess it'd be on the left, do you think they would allow that to fly? Or do you think they would keep doing, like now they've all the protests and all the different things they're doing with them. Do you think that they would allow that to fly, or do you think they'd still try to get that narrative of, hey, Trump is evil?
I think it depends on what part of the country they're from.
Yeah, probably California is not going to be, right?
Yeah, you're going to have a hard time getting a lot of California on board with this. You're not getting AOC and Bernie Sanders to say anything nice. That's a lost cause.
Sure.
But, your Democrats from the South, you'll get some nice tweets out of Ossoff. Get some nice tweets out of Clyburn in South Carolina. I mean, there are opportunities where I think you could get some goodwill around, especially for people in redder states, people in Democrats in purple districts. And you could also, I think, do a lot for the average sort of low information, low engaged voter to do something, make a big deal about it. And most importantly, when those politicians come along complaining about Trump still, it gives people ammunition against that in a comment section.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can also come out and say, we've tried to work with these people and they're still complaining, sort of thing. It actually really puts him in a pole position that they never take on because he really only cares about the base and he governs to the base and all this sort of thing.
No, you're absolutely right there.
Sort of behind.
Because even like I told you, I tend to lean to the right, but I'm more trying to move our country forward together. And, that means concessions on both sides. And, I'm a realist in that way. I guess the one question that I would have for you, Cameron, is could you say that Biden, when he was in office, that he only catered to his base as well?
I would say the base got a lot, but there were a lot of things the Republicans wanted that got done too. For example, Biden did not cancel a single Trump tariff. Not one.
That's true. He didn't. He kept all
Not
of them.
one.
Yep.
Kept them all. The tariff regime stayed exactly the same. That was a big, honestly, with the Trump administration sort of thing. It was so good. Even the Democrats kept it going.
Exactly.
I think for, a lot of union workers who tend to vote Republican now rather than Democrat, I feel like they got a lot, especially if you're a dock worker. You got a 4 month
yeah,
delay on automation of your
exactly.
contract. The railroad workers kind of got screwed because Biden banned them from going on strike because we were
Right.
having supply chain issues. But then also they got their pensions bailed out by the
Yeah.
government.
Yeah.
Complain
I
less,
got
railroad
you. Yeah.
workers. Like it's like you get to complain less now. So I do feel like Republicans did get some good things going. They got some budget priorities going, sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and especially on foreign policy. Although it was a bit of a shift from Trump, especially Russia, all this type of thing. But even like the Israel Gaza thing, you had the progressive left and a lot of Democrats demanding Biden stop weapon sales to
Yeah.
Israel and all
Yeah.
this sort
You're
of thing.
right.
And
Yep.
Biden held the line and supported Israel anyway. And there were a lot of prominent Democrats like Fetterman and others who stood right there with him
Yeah.
and did
Yep.
not go along with that because it has a super majority of support in this country. Israel supports 70%, sort of thing. A lot of, and you did not have, elected Democrats out there at the Columbia student protest, all this type of thing. I mean, you really kind of had the party really distancing itself from that and saying, no, we're supporting Israel. They get whatever they want, all this type of thing. And it cost the Dems electorally. We have
Yeah.
numbers coming out saying a lot of Dems stayed home over Israel Gaza because opinions, particularly in the Democratic Party, have shifted on that matter.
You know what's so weird about that, Cameron, is that okay, so Biden's administration, right, was still providing weaponry and stuff like that to Israel, but Democrats knew that Trump would keep doing that. So I don't understand. I guess this maybe just me trying to use common sense. Why would you vote for Trump then if it's the same thing is going to happen if you're a Democrat?
We
It's
have
so
this
weird to me.
no, we have this conversation a dozen times a day on Twitter of the people who were kind of like, I was never going to vote for genocidal Joe. It's like, Trump's going to redevelop Gaza into a Trump casino.
Exactly.
Like,
Trump
it's
Tower
like,
too.
it's like, at least with Harris, we could have maybe brought her around, maybe slowed down the shipments, got some humanitarian aid going. She would have at least argued for a two-state solution. Now you get nothing.
Yeah.
Zero. Nothing. There will be no more Gaza Strip at the end of this. The West Bank is almost gone anyway. This whole conversation with the Palestinians is about to come crashing down because Trump wants to literally physically remove them, which violates a dozen international laws, but whatever. That's what Trump wants to do. He wants to find countries to take these people in to get them out of there wholesale.
So they can rebuild it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants a clean slate. Yeah. He wants a clean slate to redevelop everything. You're absolutely right. And yeah, it is. And that's where I just go back and it's like that was not good thinking. If you think, well, Joe's going to continue, or even, Kamala, because she was, part of his office thinking she's going to continue. It just didn't make sense to me to say, well, that's why we lost the election. And I'm like, why would you, Trump's going to do it for sure.
No,
at least with
unfortunately,
your candidate, you have an option.
Numbers show that kept a lot of Democrats home. They were very uncomfortable with our involvement and all of that. And the fact that the Biden administration stayed with that was, and I mean, it would have, let's put it this way, had it gone the other way, the political fallout from that, especially in the middle of the country, among Christians, evangelicals, all this type of thing, would have been devastating.
Yep.
I mean, I don't even want to think about...
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Yep.
Yes, I mean, I don't even want to think about what the political discourse would have been.
Gosh.
If, that Biden come out and call, label Israel genocidal, all this stuff. I mean, all the stuff the progressive left wanted them to do. I cannot imagine the political fallout that would have come of that sort of thing. I mean, you will never get another Jew to vote Democrat ever again.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't. And that's a huge Democrat voting bloc. So, I mean, you'll never have another Jew vote again. I mean, the catering to that part of the party doesn't always help. And I think that's why they didn't do it. Sort of thing. And it was, to your point, it did become a damned if you don't. And I think that's why Harris took I want to argue for a ceasefire, I want to argue for a two-state solution approach, which is, Bill Clinton. This is for 30 years, we've dealt with sort of thing, and didn't want to go so far left because I think her and her consultants and campaign, all this knew if you really cater to them, they may love you, but will
you're
they
show
lose
up
other
to vote?
Probably not. And you will be absolutely devastated everywhere. Everywhere. Like, you want to find out how New York's going to vote for Trump? Do that.
Yeah,
and you just lost
exactly.
half of New York City. Like, that's
Exactly.
how Trump carries New York. Like that, sort of thing, And so, I mean, I think they ran the numbers that was a much safer
Yeah,
position to
and I
take.
mean, it makes sense
And here
because
we
we've
are.
been supporting Israel for forever since its existence, right? And I think if you do take that away, you do lose a huge voter base, regardless of which side you're on.
Actually, only
Yeah,
since 1967.
is it 67? Has it been since?
No, 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 no. So the reason why we started supporting Israel in the 70s is because Israel. So before the Bolsheviks took over, the
Mm-hmm.
Tsar was running pogroms in Russia and expelling Jews from Imperial Russia. Lenin kept the party going. So a lot of the early inhabitants of Israel were Russian Jews. Fast forward 550 years, a lot of those Russian Jews wanted to align with the Soviet Union, and it made sense for them. That was their ancestral homeland. And the worry was in the Battle of the Cold War that Israel would align itself with the USSR. And so the
Okay,
US
I
rushed in after the
gotcha.
67 war and
Yep.
said, no, 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 no. You do not want to call Moscow. No, 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 no. We'll be your best friend. How much and what do you want? We'll get it flat packed over here. We'll set it all up for all this sort of thing. I mean, it was a strategic Cold War stance. That's
Yeah,
how that all started. We
that makes
really
sense.
were not that involved in Israel's politics until after the 67 war
Until
when
we
it
saw that
kind.
it could become detrimental to ourselves.
Yes, until we were fearful that Israel would align with communism, and then we're kind of like, no, 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 Israel, we love you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Hey, bud, come on
pass the
over.
challah. Like, it was,
Exactly.
and also the reality is there was obviously a large American Jewish population. Golda Meir, prime minister, was born in Brooklyn. She's actually
Mm-hmm.
American, sort of thing. I mean, there was already kind of existing ties. A lot of the early funding for Israel came from wealthy American Jews who just wrote huge checks to fund supporting Israel. There were fundraising efforts in the 40s and 50s for all of this. And some of that was on Mrs. Maisel on Amazon if you want to go watch that. Yeah, I mean it was a Cold War gimmick. That's really why it was. Personally
Yeah.
speaking, I think our support of Israel has made our foreign policy in the Middle East very difficult. I think one of the successes of the Trump administration was the Abraham Accords, getting Saudi
Yes.
Arabia and Israel together. That's as big as the Camp David Accords when Jimmy Carter got Egypt and Israel to sign a peace treaty, first Arab nation to sign a peace treaty with Israel. That was a huge one for the Trump administration and a good thing. No complaints, 10
Yeah.
notes from this leftist.
Yep.
Great thing to do. I think one of the good things about that is I think a lot of leaders in the Middle East, like the Saudis, the Jordanians, whoever the hell's running Syria these days,
Right.
is
Whoever it
starting
is.
to realize we're going to have to learn to live with them. So we better find a way to do that. And I think Riyadh is like, yeah, yay, Jews. Let's learn to live with them. They're clearly not going anywhere. So we'd best learn to live with them. If it's good for the Egyptians, it's good enough for us. And learn to live with them. And that is, I think the calculation has changed as opposed to the 90s when that was not a conversation. Not
Yeah.
a conversation.
Not at
Lord
all.
knows Bill
No.
Clinton tried. Not a conversation. I
Yep.
think now Middle Eastern leaders are ready to have that conversation in a way they weren't a while. And I think the success of all of this probably has reinforced that. And you're going to end up with a Palestinian diaspora throughout the region at the end of all of this, which
Gotcha.
makes me very sad. I had a woman on the show in a March episode named Dixion Halaj, and her husband was Palestinian, and she
Mm-hmm.
talks about their life in the 50s and 60s there, and it is gut-wrenching. I've had a woman who did an anthology of Palestinian writers from Ramallah on the show years ago, and I got off that call, and I'm like, I want to go write with all these people in Ramallah. I want to go there and drink coffee and meet every one of them, and I just want to hang out with them for hours. As an artist, I just want to go do art
Yeah.
in Ramallah, sort of thing, and everything. And so I really I feel bad about that, having covered it so much and having had those conversations. I even had an anti-Zionist Jew on the show one time, Alice Rothschild.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Sort of thing. Someone who has really promoted that point of view. I'm very sad by what's about to happen, but I also realize that's kind of the end game here. That's where this
Yeah.
is going.
Do you think this leads to peace? Do you think that, with this change that we can actually have peace in the Middle East?
I think at least in that aspect of the conflict, yes. There's still lots of other problems.
Yeah, tons.
Syria's government just collapsed, and that's going to be a mess. It's probably going to break
Yep.
up. The Druze, which is a traditionally nomadic desert tribe, they're actually taking territory now. They may want to form their own country. The Kurds are probably going to want part of Syria to maybe form their own country with part of northern Iraq, which will piss Turkey off. Turkey has a large Kurdish population. They don't want that. There's other problems. Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to probably end up in a conflict at some point.
Yeah.
Iran's complicity in all of this is a problem that's yet to be addressed, but I'm sure will be at some point. So there's still lots going on in the Middle East.
Lots of
But
work in the Middle East.
That conflict may at least go down to a low boil for the first time in 100 years.
Which, I mean, would be a nice change, but, only if it's a positive change for the people in that region, for sure.
I mean, I think it's great if you're Israeli.
Yeah, it is.
Much less good if you're a Palestinian resident of the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. For a lot of them, they will never be able to go home. They will have to learn to love what's left of Lebanon or Jordan or Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or Iraq or anywhere else. They'll probably never, ever be able to go back to their ancestral lands. And that, for them, is a tragedy.
As it would be for Israel, right? Because Israel would have the same complaint if it was the other way around,
I mean, I sincerely wish we could have pulled off the 1948 partition the way it was supposed to be. I would say that was Harry Truman's biggest mistake, was not understanding the type of global leadership that required of the United States to get that done.
Yeah.
And Truman, quite frankly, didn't care. And he didn't. He really didn't care. And didn't really enforce that and let it devolve into the situation that it became. And the UN was a new organization and didn't, its power was derived from the great powers involved in it. The US was nowhere to be found. The Soviets didn't care. It was a great place to get rid of some more Jews too. So, of course, sort of thing. There are support rates where like, great, we'll keep shipping them sort of thing. The Europeans were happy to also get rid of the Jews that survived the Holocaust there as well, sort of thing. And so there was no global leadership to get that done. And I also, and unfortunately, that was the time to really do it, because fast forward 50 years when Bill Clinton tried to get Arafat to agree to it, Arafat says no after begging to agree to everything, because by that time, too many people had died, too much land had been taken, too much stuff had gone wrong. And by that time, it was just really no longer a conversation. Of American mistakes in the 20th century, not ensuring a fair partition with Israel-Palestine is probably one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Thanks, Harry Truman. I appreciate you. So I have a master's degree in diplomacy and international relations and asymmetrical warfare. So I spent a lot of time studying that conflict. I wrote papers about that conflict.
Awesome. So we have the expert here on the show today. I love it.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time I spent a lot of time studying that region of the world, and wish I could spend more time there physically, but I spent a lot of time in that region of the world. And it's a very complicated place. It lives in the legacy of 3 imperial empires, the Ottoman, the Brits, and the French. And you have to understand, 1,000 years of history to understand where we got to today. And so one of the things I do with the Cameron Drill is try to explain this stuff in a way that's not going to make you ill and want to fall off your chair sort of thing, in a way that's kind of fun and makes sense. When I first started, I described my show as I'm the fun guy at the end of the bar who will tell you about what's going on in a way that doesn't make you want to throw up, sort of thing. And so, so a lot of people come to listen for that, because I can actually, explain this stuff in a somewhat neat package that kind of makes sense to the average person who didn't spend 2 years in grad school reading about this stuff.
Yeah. That's a great segue anyway, Cameron, so we can kind of pitch your show a little bit, the Cameron Journal. So do you want to tell the audience a little bit about what your show's about, the type of topics you handle, and anything really that you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, the Cameron Journal really is a journey. I was talking about this in the monologue on the News Hour on Monday. The Cameron Journal is a journey. I like to explore different stuff and different topics, and we do that on the show. So the show is comprised, every Monday I do a News Hour where I kind of wrap up the week's headlines. We usually do 7 or 8 stories, lasts about an hour. I try to keep it under an hour, because who has the time beyond
Nobody
that?
pays
No
attention.
one.
Yeah, I do a quick news episode on Fridays that's only like 15-20 minutes, just a quick hit, and we're out.
Yes, exactly. My diehard fans want longer, and I'm kind of like, that's great for you. I love that for you, but that's not for everybody. And then in the interviews, I usually talk to a lot of authors, field experts. So we'll explore business, we'll explore fiction, we'll explore different topics, international and otherwise, and just kind of talk to different experts about different interesting things. And sometimes things that you can take with you to work. I recorded an episode this week about someone who talks about soft skills while doing technical sales. So if you're a SaaS founder, if you are, in a technical sales job, whatever have you, learning those skills on how to build the rapport necessary to make those sales, we'll explore that too. It's an exploration. It's a journey. We're kind of all discovering this stuff together. And I kind of, bring a little bit of that to us, every week. And then I have my newsletter on Saturday where I talk about the things that I think are important from the week, kind of as a follow-up to the news hour. Like, oh, the news hour is on Monday, but we'll see you on Saturday, see how it all went. And I also announce things from the Cameron Journal, like our Cameron Journal Academy, where you can study writing and philosophy, Cameron Journal Plus membership, get exclusive content, and then also get it delivered emailed to you because I send out all the interviews and the news hour and everything right to your inbox. So if you missed it on
Nice.
social, whatever have you, it gets emailed to you every Saturday, including the best of the Cameron Journal. We did a big article on immigration called America's Faustian Bargain with Immigration, where I remind people that we'll never solve that until we get corporate America off the teat of cheap labor. And so we talk about that in the history of immigration in this country. So that was really good. And right now I'm doing a new collection called What the Hell is Going On, which was the title of my very first book that's no longer in print, but all the material is getting slowly cycled out onto the Cameron Journal in a great
Nice.
collection. Yeah, so it's the news hour on Monday, starts your week off. The newsletter on Saturday wraps it up. There's an interview in there in between, and wonderful stuff to read in the meantime. So that's the
Yeah.
Cameron Journal.
Awesome. And then Cameron, you talked about earlier in our episode, you talked about you have 2 books that are still in print, right? What are those 2 books for the listeners?
Well, this we're now on to my artistic side. So my the
Yes.
2 books, so the 2 books is my novel Cast Iron, which is about a young man in Missouri who finds his stepfather molesting his sister, kills him with a frying pan in his life afterwards.
Wow.
And then the second one is a short story collection called An Unfinished Coloring Book, which has all sorts of great stories, ranging from a story about the California housing crisis to a story about the old Rocky Flats nuclear manufacturing plant outside of Denver, to a story about a man who wins a $50,000 scratch-off ticket and has to get to the office before 7 to turn it in, and his
That's
journey
awesome.
across Seattle to try to get to Olympia on time.
That's awesome. I like that.
Yes,
And then you got
everyone
your
loves the ticket. When I sent that out for editing, I was edited by the wonderful Liz Williams, who's a very famous author in the UK. And she said, I love the ticket. She sent me an email at 3:00 in the morning. I love the ticket. I had to skip to the end to find out if he got there on time. Everything, because I loved it so much. So everyone,
That's funny.
it's a really good feel-good story. I have one about the opioid crisis. A man finds his son's dealer who sold him the drugs that killed him and takes care of him in a particularly horrific way. That story has scared people. They've written me or called me and talked about how frightened they were, sort of
Well, then
thing.
that's a story I definitely got to read. Like things that most people have a shock value to. I'm like, all right, that's what I want to read. I guess I'm messed up in the head that way.
So it's Cast Iron, a novel, and An Unfinished Coloring Book. They're both available at CameronJournal.com if you or you can order them in print, and I have copies, so I'll probably send them out. I'll also have to call the publisher and get them. But and then the ebooks to download. And then, and then they're also available on Amazon. If you don't want to head over to CameronJournal.com, they're available on Amazon. You can just look me up, and they are there.
Awesome. And obviously, for our listeners, all of Cameron's information is going to be on justadudepodcast.com. He's going to have his own show guest page where it'll have all his links and websites and a nice picture of yourself that you provided. So thanks for that, Cameron.
Yes, and if you're a business owner or executive, I do an exclusive LinkedIn newsletter every couple weeks where I talk about market trends and what I'm seeing in the market, how politics affects you. It's very different. Cameron Journal is very much kind of for the public, for the layperson. Mm-hmm. This is not. This is for
more
business
geared
owners.
Towards your business. Yep.
Yes. So if you're a business owner or you're an executive, vice president, C-suite, all this type of thing, follow me on LinkedIn for that exclusive content because it's very focused on my business reader. So
awesome. And that's
a business I started developing a couple years ago, and it's been very good for us. So,
and it's just your name on LinkedIn, right, Cameron?
It is. Yep. LinkedIn.com/in/Cameron Cowan. There's only a handful of us, and I'm like in the top 5. So just look for this face. And I'm the only brown one, so I'm easy to find. The others are white, so look for the brown one. Yeah.
That's funny. I love that. Perfect. Yeah. So what do you got coming up next, Cameron? I know you got, obviously you're going to keep doing your podcast and your newsletter, but we touched briefly about your new book that'll be coming out in the summer, right?
Yes, new book is coming out in the summer. We have great philosophy content from Dan Sanderson coming out for the next couple months. He's an executive contributor at the Cameron Journal, which is really great. He's one of our first thought leaders, which is been a wonderful journey for him. I have a client book that came out today called About Not Losing. It's actually a very fascinating book about a medical malpractice trial in the late 80s, early 90s. And was really cool. He was a doctor. He was the doctor on it. He went through it, and he kind of gave us this memoir / legal medical thriller about it. And it's been a year to get that book done. It's been 30 years for him to get it done, but it's what he, as
right,
a year to kind of
experience,
put it together. I zoomed into a party last night, and I said, yeah, he was just patiently waiting for me to be born, grow up, go to grad school to get an MFA, to then do his book. And so yes, that's coming out. But this year, I'm really focused on doing more public speaking at events.
Okay.
So we're actively working on that. We have a new book coming out. I am working on new fiction. I can't think you can see it because the camera's at the wrong angle. But I do have up there my next fiction manuscript is historical fiction. It's Downton Abbey set in the antebellum South, called the Sweetgrass Saga. Yes,
I like that.
And so
I like that.
Yes, it's upstairs, downstairs. You have the Dodson family upstairs and a gaggle of African-American slaves downstairs and their lives and politics and all that sort of thing. I wrote that in grad school. It's actually set... It's based on the plantation my family came from in northern Mississippi, kind of north of Jackson and north central Mississippi. And the guy's name was Edward McGee. We took the last name and nothing else and left. And so it's called Bowling Green, but this is called Sweetgrass, and so it's set in a similar environment. And so it's kind of long and heavy because it's historical fiction, but it starts in 1850. It's the first of a series of at least 3 that takes us through the Civil War, and it'll be my next historical fiction. And I was talking to the big publisher boss today. He would like to have that this year because the manuscript is basically done. I need to go through and make some edits, but it's ready to go into production.
Awesome.
I don't know if I'm going to have time to get to it, but we're going to try. It's March. We'll see how it shapes up. We'll see, but that's kind of what's coming up. What's coming up next?
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I just want everybody to come stop by. The News Hour, we're on everywhere podcasts are at. All the interviews and stuff are there. The News Hour is a live YouTube show that doesn't go very well on podcast channels, so please go to YouTube and watch that. But we'll still be doing the News Hour, we'll still be doing the newsletter, all the fun interviews and everything. Lots of really great guests coming up.
Awesome.
Over the next several months, and then be out on the lookout for America's Lost Generation.
I'm looking forward to that one because I think obviously I can identify to that. So as we've already talked it in ad nauseum.
ALG will be coming out this summer, and we might get new fiction in the fall or winter. We'll see.
Nice. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
I have a client book to get done first. She's doing a book. She does a holistic equine rehab center for autistic people.
Nice.
And it's called Autism and the Horse. And so she's been writing it, and I've been kind of helping her with it. I got to get her book done first. Once we get hers done, we'll see.
Then you'll work on yours, maybe, if you have time.
Yes, we'll see if I have time to touch Sweetgrass Saga this year. So
that's awesome. That's a great idea, though, too. Just the equine, working with autistic, because that's such a big. I have to imagine going in for, a child with autism. I'm assuming she's with children, but it could probably be adults as well.
All the way up. Yeah. She goes all the way through. Yeah.
But I mean, it's got to be overwhelming for these folks at first to see a huge animal like a horse. But then I have to imagine that it probably just breaks them out of their shell once they get used to it.
It's actually kind of funny. Ironically, I am also autistic, and we've laughed about it's a book about autism edited by an autistic person. And there's a lot of autistic people that are oftentimes much more comfortable around animals than humans. So one of the things she talks about is how easily a lot of her clients identify with the horses.
Wow.
And get along with them instantly.
That's awesome.
There's just kind of this connection that happens.
So it's better
really
connection than what we would think it would be.
Yeah, I mean... You have the logical thing of like, oh my God, that's 2,000 pounds of... I grew up on horses. 2,000 pounds of horse flesh, that's got to be so scary. Yeah. And weirdly enough, that would be what you'd anticipate, but it's actually the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah, and so the book explores all these relationships and how people have found healing and emotional regulation and worked on the really tough parts of the disability through working with horses. And it's just such a lovely and sweet book.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's awesome that you get to do a lot of that stuff, Cameron, and actually putting your degree to work, right?
No, yeah, and like I said, we've laughed about the book about autists edited by the autistic person. This book is heavy on the autism, but I think what's really great is especially for parents of children that are very low functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I was very lucky. I'm very high functioning. Like, I've had multiple girlfriends. I've lived with girlfriends. Like, I have friends, sort of thing. I would know how to live on my own. I live 2,000 miles from my nearest family, sort of thing. Like, but there's a lot of people that's not true.
That's
and I
not
think a
the
lot of
normal for them,
parents,
right?
yes, a lot of parents are looking for answers, and this is a way. And even for other professionals are looking for answers. And she's done something really special on the Zen farm. She's in Wisconsin. Really something special on the Zen farm with what she's done. And we're trying to bottle it, basically, in a book that people can read.
Yeah, and get it out there so other people can see it. And, maybe
we're
people...
trying to bottle the magic. Absolutely.
Yep. That's what I love. I love bringing people like yourself on, Cameron, that, are creative and artistic, who have, again, my show is just about what we call, and I put it in parentheses or in quotes, normal everyday people, because what the hell is normal, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows, but we're everyday folks, right? We're grinding. We're here living, from the bottom up, just like you said. And, that's why I love having guests like yourself and most of my guests, because I say we take normal people and share their extraordinary stories. And, so
creatively, I do that a lot in my creative work. So my short story collection, it's a lot like, take the guy with the ticket, with the lottery ticket. Mm-hmm. He's a Seattle dock worker.
Wow.
And that's based on someone... Yep. I knew this married couple. That was the husband's story. That's how he got out of working concrete. I kind of took some liberties with the idea. But yeah, he was he was pouring concrete every day and won a bunch of money and got into tech and went from there. And so I took that idea and took it in a different direction. And of course, he meets a girl along the way on the train. Yeah. It's very romantic. So a lot of my artistic work is writing about everyday people. I find those stories endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these sort of moments from life, and people sometimes don't necessarily understand it at first, but it's very easy to identify with, because you've met these people that I write about. Know them, sort of thing.
This is your neighbor. This is your buddy you work with. This is, your wife. Yeah. This is, it's all these people that we know. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I find a lot of those stories just so fascinating. I unfortunately have the curse of people will tell me everything and anything at any time. I haven't flown really since the pandemic. I've traveled, but not flown. Flying used to be really terrible, because I would sit down and want to sleep, want to read, whatever have you, and someone was ready to tell me their whole life story. Yep. I was kind of like, okay, that's what we're doing for the next 4.5 hours. You were telling me about your divorce. How did this begin? Sort of thing.
Exactly.
So it's so I write a lot about that everyday sort of life. I mean, in Cast Iron, our main character becomes a sort of pseudo straight for gay prostitute with a guy who has AIDS, doesn't tell him, while cooking meth, and then escapes to date a stripper, and then joins a traveling combine company. That's the arc of that book.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
sorry, I think that's awesome. That's some. But
here's the reality is that I know 5 white working class students that definitely did that, or some variation of it. That's where I got the idea from.
Yeah, it's not, they're almost like true stories where do you remember the old show Dragnet? Where it's like true stories, but only the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And that one of the things I found very frustrating in a lot of the reading I was doing, and I love classic literature. If you go to visit my official book list, you will see lots of very classic staple things I think everyone should read. But in a lot of the modern literature, I'm kind of like, this was written by someone who has lived in New York their entire life. They've never been to Yonkers, much less Albany. They struggle leaving Manhattan. And it's like, oh, your friends all went to Fordham or NYU. And I'm sitting in Colorado being like, someone needs to write something for the rest of the country.
Exactly.
Sort of thing. And so my books and stories are always set. I love a big city, and I live near New York now. Like, sort of thing. But my writing work is everywhere else. It's in Missouri. It's all over the place, telling these stories of other people and other dramas that I think are fascinating, that are very working class sort of thing, but that I think are important stories that need to be told, that aren't just written from a certain class perspective. Like,
yes.
Oh yeah. Like, and you, especially some people get scared because they're kind of like, you really know, like, a lot of, drungligo and everything. I'm like, some of us have lived. That's all I'll comment on that. Some of us have lived.
Exactly.
Sort of thing.
We all have experiences.
But understanding, like, like how, like, the streets work and all that sort of thing, that very, very rarely do you find that. And I think the thing that kind of impress people is I take that and I make it high literature.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of unusual. And I mean, my debut, I had 3 agencies fighting for it in New York at one point.
That's a
And
good problem
because
to have.
I called my dad, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do about this. And so it was a little crazy there for about 48 hours. But yeah, it was really, it was a very different sort of thing because it's not written by a certain person with a very certain background from a very certain region of the country that doesn't know what everyone else is doing. And so I love that your show does that because that is the center of my art.
And
Like
I
that's
think,
the center of my writing.
and that is really why, if, for those listening, Cameron and I got hooked up on a platform called Podmatch, and it's a great way for podcast hosts to get connected to guests. And I saw Cameron's profile and I was like, this is like exactly what I want to do. Here's a guy that's trying to do the same thing I'm doing, only you have a lot more artful influence than I do. I'm just doing the podcast, but you're a writer, an author, you're doing your own podcast. And I was just like, just having you on the show to show that, yes, there are normal people that are doing extraordinary things. And I just wanted to, thank you again for coming on, Cameron, because I think this has been a great discussion. I think we went off, I think we had an outline, but who knows? We haven't looked at that. I haven't looked at that since, I don't know, probably minute 2. But
no, I mean, we've covered, we had great discussion. We've covered everything. We've covered, the books. We've covered the show and how all that stuff works and let people know to come check it out and participate in it. Yeah, I think we've covered, everything. And then we've gotten into a little bit of performance art. I was an actor. I was a stand-up comedian for a long time, which is why some of the stuff I say is funny. Yeah, I used to host drag shows and drag brunches and burlesque shows and all this type of thing, and which kind of grew out of the whole fashion thing. But I started doing stand-up in college and everything, and I just kept doing it for a long time. And I did little tours around Colorado. I was a gigging musician. I played the nursing home circuit in Colorado for a long time.
That big fan base, right?
Yeah, exactly. We could have used some of that USAID money. So for sure, we need an arts grant quickly. And so, yeah, so it's just I will say this of myself. I've gotten to live a crazy, amazing life. When I was 17 years old, I wanted to do all of these crazy things and had no clue how I was going to do it. And I've gotten to live a crazy, amazing life. So much so I think I'm ready to own a house, sell down, and maybe garden. Because it's been a fun adventure.
Yep.
And I'm ready to grow some tomatoes, of thing. But I've lived a crazy, amazing life, and I just invite people to come along on the journey with me as I talk about this stuff. There's some fun thing on the channel as well. I did a music film, an 1.5 hour long music film with a guy I met in a parking lot in Tacoma.
That's
called
cool.
Stan. Yeah, he was a street busker. His name was Stan St. Louis, and he and I did a music film together for his album called Heart Close. It's called the subtitle is called Under the Bridge because part of it's recorded under a bridge in Tacoma, and partly in our buddy's yurt in his backyard. And it was just the intro. You get to see me make an illegal right turn in the middle of downtown Tacoma. It's very real. We were just holding the camera out the sunroof of my car. So that's the stuff that I've been just making and doing this whole time. Long to say, I've lived this crazy, amazing life. And I just try to bring a little bit of that to the readership, whether I'm doing an essay, if I'm doing a story time, my ongoing travel series, because I've been everywhere in this country there is to go in a few places internationally in my crazy life that I've lived. And so whether it's my travel series or it's an essay about something or in an interview, that's just what I try to bring to people. And so I just invite people to come on the journey. And the world is hard. This is there for a reason, because we try to make it easy. We try to make it understandable. And we're just going on this journey together. And I honor everyone that comes by. I always say my biggest achievement was that I convinced a QAnon Trump supporter that universal healthcare was a good idea. And it took me he worked for me at a previous publication I had. And people say, oh, you're just against, I'm like, no, I've hired them. Exactly. I'm not against Trump supporters. They've worked here. And so, but that's the type of conversation where he and I would go rounds. We agreed on very little. He was my tech editor. We agreed on very little. But I eventually brought him on to be kind of like, you have a terrible disease that keeps you working from home, hence why I hired him.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but here's the reality. I don't think that you should live a terrible life because of that. And I'm willing to write a check for that. And I think a lot of other people are too. And so that moment, that's like the Cameron Journal in a bottle. That's kind of that's the type of conversations we're having. If you're curious about stuff, just want to know about things, and just kind of want to have, again, that friend at the end of the bar that can just make it all make sense so that your head doesn't explode. CameronJoel.com, everybody. Come
Yep.
on by.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Cameron, again, thank you for letting me be a part of your journey as we went through this episode together. I truly enjoyed having you on the show, and you are welcome back anytime you want. Anytime.
No, thank you. No, it was absolutely delightful, and I've been looking forward to this for several days. This is my last appearance for a while. I need a break. I've been a little bit of I need to rest and relax and go up again. I've been looking forward to this the whole time. You've been absolutely delightful. The conversation is so good, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you again, Cameron. Well, that was an enlightening journey through the multifaceted world of Cameron Cowan. From politics to creativity, from education to entrepreneurship, Cameron has shown us that one person can indeed wear many hats and make a significant impact in diverse fields. I want to thank Cameron for joining us today on Just a Dude podcast. Your insights have given us a lot to think about, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to dive deeper into your work. If you're intrigued by what you've heard today, make sure to check out Cameron's website, The Cameron Journal, for more thought-provoking content. Don't forget to listen to the Cameron Journal podcast for further discussions on the issues that matter. You can follow Cameron on all social media. All the links are in our show notes and at justadudepodcast.com under his guest page. I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Just a Dude Podcast. And if you'd enjoyed this conversation, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time with another incredible guest. Until then, I'm Nathan, signing off. Take care, everyone.